For many Batman fans, Batman the Animated Series is seen as the definitive take on the mythos in moving media. It's what started the love and obsession for the Caped Crusader for an entire generation of people. And in a lot of ways, it's what's become the blueprint of the modern Batman. But what is it that makes this series so important and influential? Well, the truth is that there's no short answer. Because we're not listing one or two things, we're listing 1 or 2 billion. It's hard to know where to start.
The heart first. Heart.
Amongst all of the series' greatest attributes, I think what stands out the most is its heart. Each and every episode felt like a labor of love made by people who were passionate about what it was they were doing. They had a constant commitment to creativity. It didn't feel like these episodes were being made just because there was a demand for it, but rather because there was a sincere story to tell there. And the stories they told, despite following cartoon characters, felt all too real. In spite of being a show that showcased giant Batmen, crocodile crooks that lived in the sewers, and the occasional werewolf, Batman the Animated Series still told really human stories. The show treated its growing audience as just that, growing people, challenging them with deep themes that delve into trauma and tragedy. The show follows a hero who lives in a place of despair but still looks to inspire hope. He's plagued with personal problems in spite of the fact that his personal life is only a front for his nighttime activities. Batman's origins are a tale as old as time. Everybody knows it. 2 gunshots in the night, a splash of blood, a spill of pearls, and an orphan is made. But what this show did better than any other is show the psychological effect that has on Bruce Wayne. Losing his parents at a young age, witnessing their murder, all of that still affects the man underneath the mask in his adult years. On some level, he's always held himself responsible for their deaths. He carries an incredible amount of guilt from their passing. It never gets resolved. In actuality, it continually gets added to, which we see whenever we dive into the character's psyche. Whether that be through nightmare sequences, Scarecrow's fear toxin-induced hallucinations, or other episodic narrative devices. Yet despite all the guilt he carries, he doesn't get consumed by it. If anything, he lets that pain inspire him. He fights to stop history from repeating itself, from allowing lives to be scarred the same way his has. Even when he's offered the perfect life via virtual reality and mind control, he rejects it in favor of a much harsher reality. But I do think it's telling that in Bruce's perfect life, he's not Batman, because he doesn't need to be. It's interesting to know that on some level, Bruce Wayne would like to just be Bruce Wayne, yet he leaves that perfect world to continue to be Batman in an imperfect one, because that's where he's needed. The only thing more complicated than his nightlife is his love life. The show offered up characters like Catwoman, a woman both Bruce and Batman have come to love, but constantly have to apprehend. While she's portrayed as a criminal, she's not shown to be a truly bad person. Her awful actions may come off as selfish, but typically she does what she does under selfless means. Something Batman can understand, but never truly agree with. And yet, despite the different sides of the coin they fall under, they still fall for each other. But it's those differences that will forever keep them apart. And while a mutual love is shared between the two, a mutual love of justice is not. And the law constantly comes between them. But despite this, Bruce doesn't give up on Selina, still choosing to see the best in her, knowing that there's a genuinely good person underneath that cat mask. But then again, maybe Bruce just has a type, as later on he'd fall for the daughter of his enemy, even after being made aware of her allegiance. And eventually it would be revealed that his first love had taken on the role of a violent, vengeful vigilante. But none of these relationships ever lasted, partially due to their general dysfunction, but also due to the fact that at best, all they'd ever be is Bruce's mistress. Because Batman is married to the mission. It's what drives him. Everything else is secondary. When the show allows Robin to reminisce, reliving the night that his parents were taken away from him, it's some of the most heartbreaking material this series has ever worked with. An exact trauma that he and his mentor share. Grayson takes matters into his own hands and begins searching for his parents' killer at a very early age. He does so on his own, but is unable to apprehend the crook. Almost a decade later, Batman learns of the killer's whereabouts, and at first he tries to hide that from Robin. But when the Boy Wonder figures out his secret, he becomes uncharacteristically rage-filled. The normally calm and collected Robin becomes driven by vengeance, blinded by it. Just as he's about to take his revenge and avenge his fallen family, he snaps back to his senses and leaves the situation in the hands of the authorities. At the end, Batman gets uncharacteristically emotional, almost sounding like he's about to break down mid-sentence when he says,
Zuko's taken so much, caused you so much pain. I couldn't stand the thought that he might take you, too.
In terms of Batman's iconic rogues gallery, the show always gave its audience something to think about, providing them characters who were flawed people and typically victims of unfortunate circumstance. Characters who didn't always fall on one side of the moral compass, providing stories filled with compelling complexities that other cartoons didn't. While this show was seemingly made for children, it often dealt with a lot of adult themes, digging deep into the psyches of all its inhabitants and showcasing the duality of man, showing that a lot of Batman's villains are also in addition victims in their own right. Despite being a 2D cartoon, it came with very three-dimensional characters, people who did bad but meant good, people who were seen as good that did bad. In this world of red skies, rarely were things black and white. A lot of the threats Batman came across were born out of trauma and Shakespearean tragedy. It may sound contradictory, but these criminals were done justice. A lot of these bad guys were done good. The series was made up of heroes and villains that broke the mold. These weren't your black and white standard good guys and bad guys. While the show is episodic in nature, aside from the occasional two-parter, Batman the Animated Series had consistent character development and growth. When a character returned, it usually meant that they'd see some sort of evolution, each hero and villain having their own branching arc, and their stories play out naturally. Every major character has their own branching arc, and each time we see a reoccurring character, it just feels like another piece of their overall story. Harvey Dent was given a part to play prior to the corruption of his character, acting as Gotham City's DA and Bruce Wayne's best friend. We get just enough time to know how noble and honest he is, but despite his good nature, he carries a dark side which he falls victim to through circumstances outside his control. He cracks under the pressure of being a public official and begins to spiral due to a split personality brought on by stress. The show presents his inner scars before exposing him to his outer ones. And what's truly tragic is that his fall from grace feels completely undeserved. Batman tries in vain to save his best friend, but inevitably he becomes one of his worst enemies. His failure to save Harvey weighs heavily on his conscience. He holds himself personally responsible for circumstances outside his own control. It's a guilt that he never truly gets over, and a resentment Harvey begins to obsess over. Even when Two-Face sees Batman as his foe, Bruce still refers to Harvey as a friend, showing concern for his well-being over everything else, trying his best to rehabilitate the rogue and appeal to his better half.
Good old Bruce. Always there. You never give up on me.
The show shows how powerless Harvey truly is to, well, Harvey. He's a victim to himself, self-sabotaging in the most literal of ways. As he's about to be operated on to surgically repair the other half of his face, his other half breaks free and lashes out. Because while the character's outer scars help identify him, it's his inner ones that define him, just as the show puts it.
You hated Harvey Dent, and would do anything to destroy him.
He's not alone either. In a much similar situation, we see a frail, weak, and feeble Arnold Wesker living in a constant state of anxiety. Much like Two-Face, he's made an accomplice and a passenger in his own vehicle due to a split personality with a rap sheet. In the ultimate and most ironic cruelty, the ventriloquist is merely a puppet of Scarface. He's a hostage who has to face the consequences of his kidnapper. Yet because of some strange self-appointed Stockholm syndrome, he feels devoted to this inanimate object. There's some other similar stories in the animated series that see villains becoming victims of themselves. Maxie Zeus is overcome by an alter ego that is brought on by pure ego, believing himself to be so powerful that he is Zeus living in a modern world. He rejects his loved one's pleas in favor of feeling like he is power incarnate, only finding solace when he's brought to Arkham Asylum, feeling that he's now seated amongst the other gods. In the comics, Mr. Freeze was just a guy with a fishbowl helmet and an affinity for ice. Nothing more than a common thief with a freeze ray and a couple of puns. But Batman the Animated Series rewrote the character as a scientist desperately trying to find a cure for his ailing wife, only for corporate greed to cost her that life, and him the quality of his. His accident also ensured that he was damned to an eternal life without the love of his. His cold, careless nature doesn't act as evidence to the emptiness of his soul, but rather as evidence of a soul completely crushed. Despite his wrongdoings, Batman shows Freeze sympathy, showing him possibly the only bit of warmth that he'd ever received since life gave him the cold shoulder. But Freeze doesn't accept his kindness, as Freeze is only motivated by avenging his wife's death, seeking revenge on those he feels responsible for her passing. And once he feels justice has been served, he's willing to accept the consequences of those actions, peacefully spending the remainder of his days at Arkham Asylum, only leaving his sentence by force and carrying out his crimes upon finding Nora still alive, and still cryogenically frozen. Despite his hatred of humanity and his claims of not caring for others, Batman manages to reason with him and get him to see the error of his ways. Freeze surprisingly takes a stand and saves the day on multiple occasions. I always found that there was an unspoken respect between Freeze and Batman. Freeze didn't see Batman as an enemy, so to speak, but rather the occasional obstacle. There's no animosity on his side, there's just conflicting goal objectives and moral compasses that make the two opponents. There never seems to be any long-lasting hard feelings. Mr. Freeze does wrong in trying to do right by his wife, seemingly finally giving up his criminal ways upon curing Nora and disappearing into the winter night, with his pet polar bears at his side. Character made for the show Mary Dahl is an actress born with a medical condition that causes her to look much younger than she actually is. She was a successful child star who wasn't actually a child at all. Being the face of the sitcom, loved that baby. But she sought greener pastures, looking on to take work more fitting of someone her age, only to be overlooked by the industry because of her appearance. Her appearance, which once played in her favor, was now the defining trait causing her not to get work. After years of failure in her field, she desperately tries to relive her glory days, taking her TV family hostage and forcing them into a made-for-me reunion. Baby Doll falls into her act, attempting to play the persona permanently, traumatizing her former friends and coworkers along the way, only for her to realize through an unfortunately placed hall of mirrors that that's all just an illusion of her own creation. As she comes back down to reality, Batman doesn't scold the actress, but instead provides her a shoulder to cry on. Or, in this case, a kneecap. Baby Doll isn't the only actor made adversary with a tragic tale to tell. The show's Clayface had a story just as sad. Matt Hagen was a very famous actor prior to a car accident that disfigured his face. Looking for an answer to his problems out of a fear of losing work, he acts as the proverbial guinea pig for an experimental face cream. A cream that also granted him the ability to physically morph into anybody he'd like. As a payment for this face and life-altering cream, Hagen was made to take part in all different types of criminal schemes. In an attempt at keeping his good looks, he tried to rob Daggett Industries of the product, which didn't go as planned, as Daggett's henchmen waterboarded Hagen with Renew You, thus creating this big blob of clay known as Clayface. Clayface constantly causes chaos, and his wrath leaves behind a laundry list of criminal activity. But at the end of the day, all Hagen wants is a return to normalcy. He's not out there seeking revenge, he just wants to be like everybody else. Batman tries to reach out and reason with Clayface, but he's far too jaded to listen. While Matt Hagen may have given up on humanity, Batman never gives up on him. Unfortunately, it's his inability to trust that winds up being his downfall. While Harley Quinn's origins are followed up in the sister show, The New Batman Adventures, her story was nonetheless heartbreaking before it was written out in explicit detail, where she's shown to be hopelessly devoted to a person who mistreats her, a man who's neglectful at best and abusive at worst. At some point in time, Harley tries to turn her life around. She tries to give up crime cold turkey, only to feel judged for her past and crack under pressure. But Batman reassures her that she can still turn her life around, and that everybody has bad days. Even the characters who don't have their origins rooted in tragedy still carry a sense of sadness to them. In a similar story to Harley's, when self-centered bird enthusiast the Penguin becomes smitten with Veronica Vreeland, he desperately tries to reinvent himself, seemingly giving up crime and becoming a law-abiding citizen. But when he finds that her affection for him was a ruse, he's heartbroken and enraged. The Penguin goes back to his nefarious ways and plots his most diabolical revenge scheme yet. The show doesn't give us a specific background on the character, but we can infer that being brought up being different probably plays an integral role in his villainy. The desire to live a lavish and luxurious life with power and status may come from a life lived feeling powerless and unseen, which is probably why he's so reactionary when he's made the butt of the joke. Killer Croc, a brainless brute whose motives are either greed or revenge related, is almost given a sympathetic redemption arc. After escaping custody, Croc is found and taken in by a sideshow circus family living in isolated harmony. They treat him with such kindness and care that Croc actually begins to rethink his actions, and for a moment decides against robbing them. Unfortunately, this consideration doesn't last. Croc eventually betrays the family because that's who he is, showing that even when he's properly nurtured, he can't fight off his true nature. To the disappointment of the new friends he just made, Poison Ivy is an eco-terrorist who pursues a life of crime in order to preserve nature. Her goal is actually commendable, but her method of achieving that goal is very much condemnable. At the time, it wasn't common for hero shows to incorporate bad guys with good intents, but here it was all too commonplace. For a moment there, it looks like Ivy's turned over a new leaf, leaving her criminal activist days behind her and starting a family of her own, taking up the role of a mother to two and a wife to a husband, living a peaceful existence with a housed garden. It's everything she could ever want. Batman's skeptical of her reform at first, but gradually accepts her change, only to eventually find out that it's all a front. Her family is actually genetic mutations that start off as children, but grow into temporary henchmen for the femme fatale. The real Poison Ivy winds up leaving behind a distraction as the real deal makes her getaway. In most cases, this would end with an evil cackle, the villain giving themselves some sort of pat on the back and congratulating themselves for getting one over on the hero. But there's no gloating here. As she makes her escape, she looks back at an old scrapbook and reminisces about her fake family. A happiness she was able to simulate, but one that she'll never truly know. I've never before seen a show with such substance, providing their fans with both quality and quantity work. Almost every single episode in this series is a classic. I know that sounds hyperbolic, but it's really not. Even the episodes with one-off characters and super contained plots contain some of the show's most memorable moments. Supercomputer Hardak creates duplicates of the citizens of Gotham City. Eventually the Rogue recreates Batman, but does so a little too perfectly, creating a Batbot that for a time being fools the audience and itself into believing that it's the real Batman. And we see this tech-made heart break as it tries to cope with the truth of its existence.
I have memories, a past.
You have information, data, nothing more.
It's beyond hurt when the man it believes to be a lifelong father figure is shown to be in fear of him. And when it's tricked into thinking that it's broken the Bat's code of never taking a life, this duplicate is so overcome with guilt and grief that it sacrifices itself in response. The episode ends with Batman questioning the robot's feeling, and ends with the audience feeling for the robot.
Could it be it had a soul, Alfred? A soul of silicon, but a soul nonetheless.
In one of the heaviest human dilemmas this show ever tackled, we're introduced to Gotham's top crime boss, Arnold Stromwell. Following a falling out with his wife and his son's apparent kidnapping, his life is sent spiraling down, causing him to lash out at the competition, thinking that they're the culprits. Batman attempts to reason with the leader of Gotham's criminal underworld, trying to get him to see the error of his ways, eventually revealing that his son wasn't taken captive, but is instead being hospitalized following an overdose on the drugs that Stromwell was trafficking. Arnold is so overcome with guilt and grief, feelings he was all too familiar with already, tormented by the memory of accidentally costing his brother his leg and nearly his life. Eventually he's forgiven for his actions, after promising to atone for his actions and start with a clean slate, thus proving the title of the episode, It's Never Too Late. In Beware the Grey Ghost, we're shown one of the only positive flashbacks of Bruce's past. Batman meets his childhood role model and TV superhero, the Grey Ghost. The Grey Ghost was played by actor Simon Trent, a down-on-his-luck, past-his-prime actor who was once beloved by people, now forced to deal with the reality that he's being willfully forgotten about. Once a major name, he now struggles with getting work and paying the rent. But when some nostalgic nerd starts recreating bombings from the show, Batman needs to team up with the caped actor. The two work the case together and begin to bond, with Bruce opening up to the aging actor and even showing him his Grey Ghost collection. What makes these scenes especially sweet is that Simon Trent is played to perfection by former Batman actor Adam West. You may think with the years of seeing his comedic chops that he may not be up to snuff with the more serious side of Batman, but he really matches the tone. This character was as heartfelt as any other heartbreak on the animated series.
I used to admire what the Grey Ghost stood for.
I'm not the Grey Ghost.
I could see that now.
This meeting of the mantle meant a lot, and I think this was a beautiful passing of the torch moment between the Batman of the past and the Batman of the present.
You know, as a kid, I used to watch it with my father. The Grey Ghost was my hero.
Really?
And he still is.
Above everything else, Batman the Animated Series is finding hope through heartbreak and trying to triumph through tragedy. If you don't believe me, you can ask Batman himself.
V, this is Kevin Conroy. You know me as Batman.
I am vengeance.
I got your message and your request. What does Batman the Animated Series mean to me? That's a very loaded question, and I bet you get a lot of different responses from everybody, because everyone has a unique relationship to the show. I think what surprised me most when I started doing it was the connection that people have to the character, the audience. There's a passionate connection there. It's very unique. It's not like that for Superman or Wonder Woman or The Flash or any of the other superheroes. There's a really unique identity that people have with Batman. And I asked myself early on, why is that? The best reason I could come up with is because of all the superheroes, he's the one who's not a superhero. He's the one who's got nothing supernatural to rely on. He can't fly, he can't see through walls. He's a man, and he's a very damaged man. He's been beat up by life, brutally seeing his parents murdered in front of him as a child. What's unique about him is how he reacts to that, to the brutality of life. He doesn't let it make him angry or bitter or crush him. He takes that pain and he uses it to transform himself into something magnificent, into like this angel of redemption, wanting to heal the world of evil, which is of course impossible, but he wants to leave the world a better place. And he only has his physical strength to do it. So to me, what BTAS represents is a redemption story, overcoming the tragedies of life, the challenges of life, and overcoming it in a very noble way, so that you want to heal the world of evil. It's a very ennobling story, and that is why I think people react so passionately to him, because we all get challenged by life. We all get beat up by life. Fate is so random. You don't know what's coming tomorrow or next month or next year. You have no control over that. But what you do have control over is how you react to it. You can let those surprises that life throws at you crush you, make you angry, make you bitter, or you can learn from them and take that knowledge and get back into life and contribute to the world. That is a choice we all face every day because we're human. And we all stumble in our lives. We all make mistakes. But that's not what defines us. What defines us is how we get back up, how we learn from our mistakes and get back into life. That's what defines us. So that's what Batman the Animated Series meant to me and means to me, is that ability to absorb life's shocks and those curveballs that life throws at you and turn them into something positive. I hope that helps. Take care.
All of this barely scratches the surface of why I and so many other people love this series, which is why we end this episode not with closing credits, but instead with a to be continued. So if you like this video and would like to see the next installment in this ongoing series, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
I put on Batman the Animated Series, your favorite. I'm in too much pain to watch cartoons. Oh, this is a good one.
Now, before I go, I don't usually do this. I've had a Patreon for a while now, but I've really struggled with what to do with it. Luckily, the time is upon us where I can actually offer you guys exclusive and extended content that I can't make here on the channel. With new restrictions on what kind of content can be monetized or hell, even shown here on the platform, now's as good a time as ever to be placing my completely unaltered, uncensored, extended videos on my Patreon. I don't want to put my videos behind a paywall, but that's kind of the best place to put them for the time being. So if there was ever a time to give a stranger money on the internet, well, I would like to think that now is that time. Just so everyone knows, all the money I make off my Patreon goes directly back into the channel. Everyone who donates to the Patreon will not be seen as a fan, but rather a producer of said content. And you will be credited as such in the closing credits here on the channel. So if you have the time and $1 to spare, help a guy out. If you can't, I appreciate your time and attention nonetheless.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.